Hi, welcome to another video. If you've watched some of my videos, you may well have seen my repurposed first aid box, which I use as, or have used as, a solar accumulator, kind of commonly known as a solar generator. I don't like the term, so I prefer to call it an accumulator, which as far as I'm concerned is exactly what it does. Now this was quite a simple thing. It has a 7Ah SLA battery, which actually was an alarm backup battery that I got salvaged many years ago. Well, this one has finally failed, so I decided to do something a little bit different. I'm still going to use the form factor of the 7Ah SLA, but I've decided to use something a little bit more high-tech. I plan to replace it with this. Now this is in fact an empty battery case, completely empty, with the exception of some holders for 18650s. So the idea is to gather together a whole pile of 18650s, test them, mark them, work out which series of cells they're going to go in, and get them in the box. Now this will take 7 cells in parallel, 3 in series, so it gives a nominal of 10.4 volts, isn't it? The cells I'm going to use will all be salvaged. There'll be these ones are Samsung, but there's some all sorts of stuff in here. I've got some no-name ones, but I've tested each one. I've marked on them the capacity that I've measured. I've used my Lithuim Li 500 to do the capacity testing. I find it fairly accurate and fairly good. I've written down all of the capacities in my scrawl. I've used repacker.com to work out which cells go in which groups to create a battery pack of 10.3 amp hours, which 2 of them are 10.316, and then I've got one at 10.314, so 2 milliamps less capacity. But obviously this is considerably more capacity than a 7Ah SLA would have, and an awful lot more power than a worn out 7Ah SLA would have. Now for this particular project I'll obviously need this case. I think it was about £5 on eBay. Now I know a lot of people would say, well, why don't you just buy another 7Ah SLA? And yes, I could do that, but the cycle life on the 7Ah SLA is very, very small, probably at full capacity about 500, maybe 600 cycles. Now I'm using this as a bit of a test of concept. At the bottom of my garden I have some lighting which is powered by solar power, and it is it charges basically a 7Ah SLA, same as what's in my first aid power generator. But I've decided after 5 years it's probably about time that poor SLA, after being cycled many hundreds of times, is going to be retired. So the idea is to use one of these to retire it. Hopefully this will produce many more cycles, because what I'm finding now is, particularly in times of poor sunlight, the SLA at the bottom of the garden, after running an hour in the winter, it's run out of energy and it can't light the lights anymore. Now the lights only consume about 1 amp, so we're not drawing very much power from it. In the summertime it's not too bad, there's plenty of solar energy to keep the battery topped up, and it only runs for 4 hours after sunset. Well, obviously the sunset in the summer is quite late, so it doesn't have to run for very long. It doesn't certainly run through the night, whereas in the winter time there's more night, less day, less time to charge. So what I'm finding is the battery dies. So I'm going to try using Lithium's salvaged from wherever I can salvage from. These are a selection of, this was one of those hoverboard batteries which died. I've got a lot of leaky ones which I've had to dispose of, but I've got quite a few of these 2 amp hours, some of them around 2 amp. I think these ones were from power banks which were 1895 milliamp hours. So they're from a variety of sources. Now for this project I'm going to do it on an extreme budget. Recycled cells, this was like less than £6 I think, and that included these, so that's quite good value. And then I'm using a BMS, which is going to be this one here. It's a very small, very cheap BMS. I don't know if it's going to focus. No, it doesn't look like it's going to focus on it. Yes, there we go. And this is the simple type that uses a common charge discharge wire. Now a lot of these BMSs use a separate charge wire, which actually is quite inconvenient when you want to charge it and discharge it from the same source. So this one has, this is where your output would be, the plus marker, and then this is where this is the positive, output marker of positive, this is the output of negative. Now it's saying 12.6, 8.4, and should be 4.2 on that one, 0 volts. So your battery negative, the most negative point on your group of cells, would go at this point here. Next cell along, so the 4.2 cell would go onto here, and then the next cell along would be the positive, would go onto the 8.4, and then the final cell would be the 12.6. So this is balancing as well, so it'll keep the cells, should keep them fairly well in balance. I think it's only a 40 milliamp balance, so it's not a huge amount, but to be honest that's enough because it's kind of balancing continuously, and the output is just taken from here. So that's how it works. My other solar accumulator with my 35 amp hour cells, I've used a BMS that uses a separate charge connector. It's about there on the BMS. Actually that's a pain in the bum. It's much easier to use a single charge and discharge, which is this one here. These are cheap, about £3 I think this was. It wasn't expensive at all. So that is going to go in with this. To link it all together, I'm going to use good old UK Twin and Earth, which is basically, this is a 2.5mm TNA. So this is what we would get on our power ring main circuits. Inside here, if you open up, you find a red conductor, which has got a cross-sectional area of 2.5mm, a black conductor, again 2.5mm cross-sectional area. These are solid copper, and then the earth is a 1.5mm, and that one's unsheathed. So what you can do to use this stuff to peel it open, because obviously I need to expose the copper, you can separate this quite easy. You just grab hold of the earth, wind it around the end of your wire cutters or your pliers, and you yank, and it peels it right open. So then you can expose your two conductors. Get them out of the sheath. There's more here than I need. This is for the power tracks on my battery pack. I'm only going to need 2, so I don't have to strip very much of these. I've got more here than I need. So what I'll probably do is cut it to the length that I need. Actually, I don't even need to. Yeah, I will use it. There. So cut that like that, and then I will peel the copper out of this. I'll do it off camera because it's a pain. Right, there is my cut off pieces of T&E. So the idea is, I don't know why I put that back in there. The battery casing I won't need for a minute, put that aside. It has 50, what I would call solder on lugs. I was wondering whether to put a fuse in here or not. I probably won't bother, to be honest, because all the cells will be individually fused. I'm going to use the same technique as I used on my solar accumulator, where I used a spool of 5 amp fuse wire to connect all the cells together in groups. So now that I've got all my cells grouped up, all I need to do is get them in. Now I found, I'm not an expert on these things, I've just been watching lots of videos on how to do them myself, but I found the easiest way to do them is to peel off any extra stickers that are on here first, otherwise they don't fit inside these. So although I've inserted that one into here, actually I don't want that in there yet, so I'm going to group these so that I've got a group of cells with the positives to the top, then the next row the group of cells will have the positives to the bottom, then the final row will have all the positives to the top again. Now the idea of that is to make it very easy to link across when I do the interconnecting points on the cells. That's a bit horrible, isn't it? Basically they link positive, positive, positive to negative, 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 and then the other side would be the same but the other way around onto the opposing cells. So you end up with a group of 5 and a group of 5 and a group of 5 that'll all be in parallel, and then the series links will be across this way. That's the way I will do this particular one. Now the series links will be using my copper wire, and I will go across like this, with this in the way of course, so that it'll be across the top like this, and then I shall be soldering on with the 5 amp fuse wire which I've used on the previous battery pack. So each individual cell is fused with a 5 amp fuse. That way if there's a serious meltdown, one of the cells goes short circuit or whatever, hopefully the fuse wire will blow rather than the whole lot going up in flames. Assembling battery packs is the worst part of this. You have to read off the number, find from your pre-written down chart of where it's got to go. This is pack 1, so 2104 is going in here. Make sure you orientate it the correct way up. Right, so then once you've got them all grouped together, put the top part on. Now in this instance I'm going to leave this spare 6 cells free, just in case I get a couple of extra cells I might want to add in at some point, which is why I cut this longer than I need, so that it's only just a case of undoing one end and pushing some more cells in. This is the worst part, you have to give them quite a good squeeze because they're designed not to come apart very easy. I've seen some people use a hammer on them. I personally wouldn't hammer the cells. Right, now if I was using this in something like my solar accumulator, I would be drilling holes through here so that I could link zip ties through to hold the whole thing together. But because it's going into this custom made enclosure, it's an incredibly tight fit, so there's not a lot of spare capacity. There's some extra height. There we've got about 10-12 millimeters of extra height, which is actually ideal for laying a BMS on like this, although I'm not going to lay this one here. I'm actually going to use the extra space here at the minute to put the BMS in this gap here, and basically put that in there like that, so that it'll actually hold it out the way, and then I can just run 2 short cables out the BMS to the output terminals. So that is where the basic pack is going to be built, and then I'll have all my wires. I'm going to use this flat flex stuff to do the 2 BMS wires, and then I shall use probably the European wiring standard blue and brown as the main output and ground wire. But for the time being I'm going to stop this video at this point here. It's going to get too long otherwise, but that is where we are so far. So if you want to watch the kind of like the final part of this, then I'll post that in the next few days. But up till now, thanks for watching.